So before we can start talking about solving absolute value equations, I need to make sure you remember how to solve equations. And that means we're going to spend a little bit of time, not a whole lot, but a little bit of time making sure our vocabulary is correct when we're talking about solving equations. Okay? You might think I'm being picky about the vocabulary. I don't care. Okay? But I need to make sure you understand how to communicate what you're doing mathematically with me. Okay? So if this is the first equation I give you, x plus 5 equals 12, what are we going to do first to solve it? Subtract 5 on both sides. Who said that? Thank you. Why is it important that we say subtract 5 on both sides? Is that right?
No.
That's not right, okay? If you say subtract 5 and you mean on both sides, just say subtract 5 on both sides. Is that fair? Because when I subtract 5 on both sides, I end up with x, because 5 minus 5 is 0, and then 12 minus 5 is 7. Is it correct? How could you be absolutely sure it's correct? Plug it back in. 7 plus 5? 12. Does 12 equal 12? Yes. So I know that that is the correct answer. Okay? Now, I know this seems really basic. That's because it is, but I need to make sure we're on the same page. Okay? What about this problem? 2x minus 6 equals 8. If you want to add 6 or plus 6 on both sides, that's fine. 2x negative 6 plus 6 is 0, so equals 14. Divide by 2 on both sides, very good. X equals, wait, so does x always equal 7? No. Okay, so just these two examples happen to both equal 7. Is it right? 7 times 2, 14 minus 6, does that equal 8? Okay. I'm feeling pretty excited about this. You guys seem to know what you're doing. Okay? X plus 5 over 3 equals 9. What should I do first? I want to multiply by 3. Why do I want to multiply by 3? It's the inverse operation of dividing by 3, right? So if I multiply both sides by 3, what happens with this 3? That simplifies to 1, doesn't it? So on the left-hand side, what I have is x plus 5. And on the right-hand side, I have 27. Very good. Subtract 5 from both sides. So is 22 correct? 22 plus 5? 27 divided by 3? 9. Does 9 equal 9? Okay. So I'm feeling pretty comfortable to be able to go on. Are you guys feeling comfortable to go on? Okay. And let's start here. Do you remember when we were talking about parent functions and I said, what does it mean, absolute value? What does that mean? Do you remember what you said? Do you remember what I said? What is absolute value? How far it is from 0. It's a distance from 0. Very good. Okay? So let me draw this for you so you make sure you have it in your head. Okay? If that's 0, isn't that 4 away from 0? Yes. But isn't that also 4 away from 0? Yes. It is. Okay? So when our absolute value is isolated, and you'll understand more what that means in just a second. When our absolute value is isolated, what I have to do is create 2 problems. Okay? I have to create 2 problems, and I have to solve 2 problems because I know there should be 2 answers. Because I could go both directions away from 0 to get an absolute value of 0. Does that make sense? Okay? Now, I know that some of us don't know each other very well, And so asking you to trust me this early in the school year might be a push for some of you, a stretch, okay? But that's exactly what I'm asking you to do, okay? I'm asking you to trust me the way that I'm going to teach you this, how to do this today. Is going to make it way easier on us tomorrow, okay? Because today and tomorrow are very closely related. They're not exactly the same, but they're very closely related. And if I teach you the way that I teach you today, it's going to make tomorrow much easier. Okay? Because what some people like to do is just say x equals 4 and x equals negative 4. They changed this sign right here. But is this the sign that's actually being changed? No, it's what was inside the absolute value is what can be positive and what can be negative, right? So when we go to write our two problems, we're going to say whatever's inside, we leave it alone. And that would be considered as the positive version of what was inside, equals 4. And then we're going to say whatever's inside, we're going to put a negative and then put whatever's inside in parentheses and say that equals to 4. Now, I know very well that this is already solved for, and to solve for this one, all I need to do is divide by negative 1, right? Because that means now x equals negative 4. Negative 4. And we already knew our answers were 4 and negative 4, right? It's just what process are we using in our brain? The process we're going to use is what's inside is the positive or negative value, not what's outside is the positive or negative value. Does that make sense? So, are these both right? What's the absolute value of 4? What's the absolute value of 4? 4, right? Is 4 equal 4? What's the absolute value of negative 4? No, guys, listen. Absolute value is a distance from 0. Can you have a negative? When you take the absolute value, you're just going to get a 4, right? So let me ask again. What's the absolute value of negative 4? 4. Does 4 equal 4?
Yes.
Okay, what's the absolute value of positive 4? It's just 4. Is everybody okay? I'm just a little worried. Is that fair? Okay. We'll try again on the next example. How about that? Okay. So I know because I checked now that these are both correct answers, right?
Yes.
So when you see absolute value, you know you have to make two problems because you know you have to get two answers. When you see absolute value, you know you have to make two problems because you know you need two answers. So when you see absolute value, you know you need two problems because you need two answers. Why in the world would I say something 3 times right in a row?
Because you want them to remember.
I want them to remember. Yes. Okay. Have I made my point? Okay. So when I start an absolute value problem, the first thing I need to do is make sure the absolute value is isolated. Isolate the absolute value. What I mean is there anything being added, subtracted, multiplied, or divided to this absolute value or outside of the absolute value? Right? There's nothing. There's stuff inside the absolute value, but I need to make sure nothing is outside the absolute value. So once I've decided this absolute value is isolated, what do I need to do? Not yet. Not yet. What did I tell you? When you see absolute value, you need two problems. Okay? The first problem is whatever was inside, I just write it down. That counts as our positive version of what's inside. And then whatever's inside, I make a negative and write whatever's inside the parentheses. Those are my two problems. Does everybody understand where each of those come from?
Yes.
How do I solve this first problem?
Minus 6 to both.
Okay? If I subtract 6 from both sides, what does x equal? Negative 2. Now what do I do on this side? So there's actually two things I can do. Dividing by negative 1 is a perfectly fine thing to do, and it's what I'm going to do. Okay? But do you see another thing that I could do instead? I could distribute, right? I could distribute the negative to each term. But for the record, I heard divide by -1 first, so that's what we're going to do. But just to make sure you understand, we're going to distribute on the next problem, just so you can see that it's the same kind of deal, okay? So if I divide by -1 here, what happens with this -1 and this -1? It simplifies to a +1. So I just have it x plus 6 equals what? -4. So to solve, subtract 6, that's what I heard, and it's correct, equals -10. Now, I need to make sure you understand that sometimes people panic right here. Why do they panic right here? First of all, they're not the same. Second of all, they're both negative. And we just said absolute value is a distance from 0, right? Well, before we panic, let's check. -2 plus 6. 4. What's the absolute value of 4? So is this correct? Yes. What about -10? -10 plus 6? -4. What's the absolute value of -4? And does 4 equal 4? So are you allowed to get answers for x, first of all, that are different? Yes. And are you allowed to get answers for x that are negative? Yes. Is everybody okay with that? Okay. Let's try this one then. Let everybody get a chance to write it down first. So the absolute value of 2x plus 3 minus 4 equals 10. Is the absolute value isolated?
No.
I have to isolate the absolute value first. So what do I have to do to isolate it? Add 4, right? I need to add 4 to both sides. When I add 4 to both sides, I get the absolute value of 2x plus 3 equals 14. Now is the absolute value isolated? Guys, remember, I know there's stuff inside the absolute value. It's not time to mess with that yet. I just have to isolate the absolute value first. Once that's done, what do? 2 equations, right? 2 equations. My first equation is whatever's inside, I just write it down. And that's what we call the positive version of it. And then, whatever's inside, I put in a parenthesis after a negative sign, right here. And that's our negative version. Does that make sense? Okay. Now I solve each problem separately, right? Subtract a 3 from both sides. So 2x equals 11. And then divide both sides by 2. Please, please, please don't make this any harder than it is. Not that it's hard, but I'm trying to get you to understand that if I have 11 over 2, x equals 11 over 2. Am I allowed to write 5.5? Yes. I know some of you prefer decimals to fractions, but we're going to use a lot of fractions this year, and I'd like you to be comfortable with them. You don't have to be friends with them. We don't have to take them to the movies or dinner or even hang out with them. But we need to be comfortable enough to use them in problems. What if you wrote 5.5? Am I going to count that wrong? No. Actually, the only time I will count it wrong is if the directions say write your answer as a fraction. Because isn't 5.5 the same as 11 over 2? Yes? Okay. So let's try with this one. Now, what did we say we were going to do on this one? Let's distribute the negative sign to each term. If I do that, I get negative 2x minus 3 equals 14. Everybody okay with that? What do I do next? Add 3 to both sides. When I do that, I get negative 2x equals 17. And to solve for x, all that I have left to do is divide by negative 2. When I divide x by negative 2, I get negative 17 over 2. Are they correct?
Yes.
Well, 11 over 2 times 2 is 11, right? 11 plus 3, absolute value of 14. 14 minus 4, does 10 equal 10?
Yes.
So I know that one is correct. Negative 17 over 2 times 2 is negative 17. Negative 17 plus 3 plus 3, negative 14. What's the absolute value of negative 14? 14. 14 minus 4, does 10 equal 10? Then I know this one is correct also. You okay? Okay. I got 2 more problems for you. And I'll tell you right now, I am trying to trick you. Why do you think I tell you that? Why do you think I tell you I'm trying to trick you? So you can focus, right? Even more than you normally are focused, because you don't want to be tricked, do you? Okay? So, what do you think we should do first? Okay? I agree with that. Let's divide both sides by 3. And why do we have to divide by 3 first?
Isolate the absolute value.
Okay, so the first time I was trying to trick you, you didn't get tricked. Okay? Because you know what some people try to do right here? Distribute the 3. Don't. First step is isolate the absolute value. Okay? So good job on that. So we have absolute value of negative x plus 6 equals 5. Is the absolute value isolated?
Yes.
So now what?
Now we write it by
2 equations, right? What's my first equation?
negative x plus 6 equals 5.
Dang it. That means the second time I was trying to trick you, you didn't get tricked. Some people do that, right? They know this is considered the positive, right? And so they try to leave this negative sign off. But what did I say to do to get the positive? Whatever's there, just drop it down, right? So good job not getting tricked. Excellent. Now do I keep going right here? Oh, whoa, whoa. Very good. I have to make the second equation. What's it? Uh-huh. Very good. Very good. Okay. Now what do I do here? Okay, so what do you mean to do? Subtract 6 on each side. So negative x equals negative 1. If I divide both sides by negative 1, x equals 1. What do you want to do here? I could either distribute or divide by negative 1. But do you notice what would happen if I distribute? Our x is positive. And don't we kind of want that, right? We can still get this problem right if I divide both sides by a negative 1. But later on, I'm going to have to divide by another negative 1 to solve for x, right? So here, it's a wiser choice to distribute. Okay? Most of the time, it doesn't matter. But here, it's just a little wiser. It's a little quicker in the problem to do it that way.
Add 6 each side.
X equals? Okay. Are they right? Okay. Negative 1, because it's a 1, but I plug it in, so I get a negative 1 plus 6. 5. Absolute value of 5? 5 times 3? Does 15 equal 15? Okay, that's right. Negative 11 plus 6. Negative 5. Absolute value of negative 5? 5 times 3?
15.
Does 15 equal 15?
Yes.
Yes. One more. Ready? I'm trying to trick you again. In a different way this time. Whoa. Let everybody write it down. 2 minus 4 times the absolute value of x minus 1 equals 18. So the first thing we want to do is what? Isolate it. So what are we going to do first?
Divide -4 under. We divide by -4.
Divide 2 with -4 and then divide by that.
No, I need a hand.
So I need you to know me as a teacher, right? How many different answers were just like offered? A lot, right? What did I say? Nothing. Okay? What am I trying to get you guys to do? Just think. I need you to think. Because I need you to hear all the different ways that people are trying to solve this, and I need you to think. Well, what really should we do first? Okay? What's the 4 doing to the absolute value? Multiplying. Can I say 2 minus 4 before I multiply? I can't do that.
Divide by -4.
So at this point, there's 2 options. Okay? One is easier, one is the opposite of easier, but it would still be okay, right? I could subtract 2 from both sides, or I could divide everything by 4, including the 2 and the 18.
Yeah, subtract.
So, for the record, they're both acceptable options. But know that if I divide everything by 4, what's that going to give me here? A fraction. And what's that going to give me here? A fraction, right? And we don't want to deal with fractions if we don't have to. I know how you feel about them. It's okay. All right? So what do you think we ought to do first? Subtract 2. So if I subtract 2 from both sides, those of you who wanted to combine the 2 and the 4 first, do you understand why we can't do that?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, thank you. So what I'm left with then is -4, absolute value of x minus 1 equals 16. Okay. Now what?
Divide by -4.
Okay. You're in the driver's seat now, so you're telling me what to write, and I'm writing it.
Absolute value of x minus 1 equals -4.
That's isolated, so there are 2 equations.
So what am I writing?
X minus 1 equals -4.
Negative parentheses, x minus 1 equals -4. Add 1 new.
Okay, somebody else tell me how to solve the other one. Okay. This is what I heard first, so that's what I'm writing. You could absolutely just distribute, couldn't you? Okay, what am I writing?
It's positive x because x and x cancel out. Or negative and negative cancel out.
It's just x equals 4.
So x minus 1 equals 4, right? Because this negative simplifies to that, so I just have x minus 1. And now what?
You add 1 to each side, so x equals 5.
Okay.
Plug it in.
All right, -3 plus 1, or sorry, -3 minus 1.
-4.
-4. Absolute value of -4? 4. 4 times 4?
16.
2 minus 16.
12.
14.
2 minus 16.
14.
So it's -14.
Oh.
Does that equal 18? Maybe that's just the one that's wrong. Let's try 5. 5 minus 1. Absolute value of 4.
4.
4 times 4.
16.
2 minus 16.
That is negative.
It's not 18, is it?
So we messed up.
You did. But here's what I need to say before I show you what happens. Please listen. Before I show you what happens, I need you to feel confident in your absolute value equation solving skills. Because none of this down here is wrong. It's all correct. We have to go right here. Guys, when are we going to take the absolute value of something and get
Oh, you can't
a negative? Okay? So if you did this, you would get down here and realize, uh-oh, something's wrong. And you'd look back up here and say, I have my absolute value isolated and I got a negative. Will that ever happen? So you can immediately write no solution. Okay? But if you forget that, we did everything right. We wrote it into two equations. We solved each equation. We plugged it in to make sure that they were right, and we found out they were wrong. And that let us know something was up, and we looked back here, and then we write no solution. Does that make sense? So, as weird as it sounds, I want you to feel confident because all this stuff that we did was right. We just didn't need to because of the fact that the absolute value, that when it was isolated, equaled a negative number. Does that make sense?
So if you caught that before, do you have to do the rest?
If you caught it before, you don't have to write any of this stuff I'm covering up right now.
No way it has a solution.
Correct.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? If absolute value equals a negative number, it's no solution. If it equals a negative number, that's no solution. It has to be isolated. It has to be isolated first before you can decide that. But if it's isolated and it's a negative, that's no solution. Does everybody understand that? That works for equations. Is everybody clear on that?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you have any questions on this?
No, ma'am. Yeah, this
Okay, did I get a worksheet for everybody? Does everybody have a worksheet?
We have extra.
Okay, would you give that to me in just a minute? You don't have to do it right this second. All right, will you circle the following numbers? 1, 5, 6, 10, 12, 13, 15, 18, and 19. Just to be clear, 1, 5, 6, 10, 12, 13, 15, 18, and 19. Do you have any questions?